If you're thinking about selling your Los Angeles home, you may be wondering whether you should spend $10,000 fixing it up first, or $50,000, or maybe $100,000 or more. And this is where homeowners can make a very expensive mistake because some improvements can absolutely help your house sell faster and for more money. Others may return only a fraction of what you spend. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do before selling your house is almost nothing at all. So, before you remodel the kitchen, replace every bathroom, install new floors, or hand a contractor a very large check, I want you to understand how I think through this decision as a Los Angeles real estate agent. Because the question isn't really, should I renovate? The better question is, what, if anything, is preventing this house from achieving its strongest possible market response? And those are two very different questions. By the end of this video, I'm going to give you a framework for deciding whether to repair, refresh, renovate, or simply reposition the property and sell it in its current condition. And stay with me because later I'm also going to show you what I would think about differently with a $20,000 budget, a $50,000 budget, and a $100,000 plus budget. If you're new here, I'm Caroline Cookie Park with Caroline Park Properties at Equity Union. I'm a residential real estate agent here in Los Angeles, and much of my work is focused on the West Side, the Valley, and the South Bay. I make these videos because I think homeowners deserve more useful information than your house is worth X, call me when you're ready to sell. Selling a home, especially a long time Los Angeles home, is usually a much bigger strategic decision than that. There's the price. But there's also preparation, timing, disclosures, inspections, insurance, negotiation, what not to spend money on, and ultimately, how all of those decisions affect your net proceeds. So, if you're a Los Angeles homeowner and those are the kinds of conversations you want more of, please subscribe. That's exactly what this channel is about. Now, let's start with the market we're actually selling into. California is not in a frozen housing market, but we're also not in the environment we saw when buyers were routinely overlooking almost everything just to get a house. According to the California Association of Realtors, existing single family home sales in July 26 were running at an annualized pace of about 263,000 homes. According to the California Association of Realtors, existing single family home sales in July 26 were running at an annualized pace of about 263,000 homes. That was down 6% from June, although still slightly above July of last year. And the statewide median price slipped to about $888,000. Mortgage rates matter too. As of mid August, Freddie Mac reported the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate at about 6.67%. Now, those are statewide and national figures, not a valuation of your West Side home. Los Angeles is very neighborhood specific, but they explain something important about buyer psychology. Today's buyer may already be stretching to afford the purchase. So when that buyer walks into a house and starts mentally adding it up, that's $30,000 bathroom, that's a roof, the windows need replacing, what's happening with that electrical panel? Do we need to redo the floors? Is this house insurable? Those costs do not necessarily get deducted dollar for dollar from their offer. Sometimes the uncertainty gets magnified. A $20,000 problem can feel like a $50,000 problem to somebody who doesn't know what it actually costs. And that brings us to the first principle: do not renovate a problem you haven't identified. I would not start by asking a contractor what they would change. Contractors are paid to improve houses. Interior designers are paid to design houses. Stagers are paid to present houses. Real estate agents should be asking a different question: what is the market likely to reward? Imagine I walk into your home. It has a 1990s kitchen. The cabinets are dated. The counters aren't what we'd choose today. But the house has wonderful natural light, a beautiful yard, a good floor plan, large rooms, and it's been meticulously maintained. That kitchen may not actually be the problem. The next buyer may happily redo it themselves. Now imagine another house. It has a newer kitchen, but when you enter, the walls are heavily scuffed, the lighting is dark, the landscaping is overgrown, there are too many pieces of furniture, a pet odor hits you at the front door, and several little things appear to be broken. That house may need dramatically less money than the first house, but its perceived condition may actually be worse. That's why I divide preparation into four categories: repair, fix something that creates an objection; refresh, improve how the existing house feels. Renovate, actually replace or materially improve something. And reposition, do very little and price the house appropriately for its current condition. Those are four different strategies, and renovation is only one of them. Let's say you ask me, Cookie, where should I spend the first dollar? I would generally start with anything that affects the buyer's first emotional read of the property because buyers don't walk into homes with spreadsheets open. They feel something first, then they rationalize it. So I'm looking at the approach to the house, the landscaping, the front door, exterior condition, light, smell, cleanliness, clutter, paint, window coverings, floor condition, and whether the house feels cared for. None of those things are particularly glamorous, but they're powerful. A buyer walking into a beautifully maintained older home often thinks they've really taken care of this place. A buyer walking into a neglected home thinks, what else haven't they taken care of? Those are radically different thoughts, and one can cost far less to create than the other. This is also where national remodeling data becomes interesting. The National Association of Realtors' most recent remodeling impact report found that some of the projects with the highest estimated cost recovery were relatively modest improvements. A new steel front door was estimated at 100% cost recovery. A closet renovation was 83%. A fiberglass front door, 80%. Vinyl windows, 74%. Wood windows, 71%. Meanwhile, both a complete kitchen renovation and a minor kitchen upgrade were estimated at about 60% cost recovery. A bathroom renovation was around 50%. Now, don't interpret those percentages as promises. They are national estimates. Your Mar Vista home is not the national average. Neither is a Sherman Oaks pool home or a Redondo Beach bungalow. Labor costs differ, buyer expectations differ, price points differ, and design matters enormously. But the broader lesson is extremely useful. More expensive does not automatically mean more profitable. I'll say that again because this is probably one of the most important things in this video. More expensive does not automatically mean more profitable. And that's why I get nervous when a homeowner says, "We're going to put $150,000 into the house because we'll get 300,000 more." Maybe, but before spending the $150,000, I want evidence. Here's another way to think about it. Buyers aren't really buying renovations. They're buying one of three things. One, certainty. This house looks maintained. I understand what I'm buying. Two, convenience. I can move in without immediately taking on a construction project. And three, emotion. I love this house. The best preparation strategy often increases all three. And the interesting thing is that you don't necessarily need a new kitchen to do that. Fresh paint can do it. Excellent staging can do it. Removing half the furniture, opening window coverings, beautiful landscaping, changing outdated lighting can do it. Deep cleaning can do it. Making the house smell neutral can absolutely do it. That's why I think of pre sale preparation less like remodeling and more like removing friction from the buyer's decision. That's the job. Let's make this practical. Imagine you have approximately $20,000 available to prepare the home. Not every house needs all of these, but here's what I might be investigating first: interior paint, exterior touch up, landscaping, deep cleaning, window washing, minor handyman repairs, changing obviously dated light fixtures, refinishing floors if the existing floors are good candidates, editing and removing furniture, and staging the rooms that are the most important. Notice what I did not automatically put on that list: kitchen remodel, bathroom remodel, new HVAC system, new windows throughout. Those may be appropriate, but I need a reason. With a modest preparation budget, I'm usually looking for disproportionate impact. Where can $1 create $3 worth of perceived improvement? Not necessarily $3 of appraisal value, perceived improvement. Those are different. But perception drives whether the buyer falls in love enough to make an offer. Now, let's say the budget is $50,000. This gets more interesting. Perhaps the house has beautiful original hard floors under carpet. Maybe those get exposed and refinished. Maybe the kitchen cabinets are structurally good but visually tired. Would we paint them rather than replace them? Would we change hardware? replace countertops, change the backsplash, update appliances. Could we refresh two bathrooms instead of gutting them? Maybe. But at $50,000, I'm going to start looking much more carefully at the competing homes because your home isn't being judged in isolation. Imagine we're preparing a Mar Vista house at $1.8 million. What does a buyer see when they open Zillow and Redfin and look between 1.7 and $1.9 million? What else is available? How updated are those properties? How big are they? What are the lots like? Which streets are they on? How do they photograph? Which ones have air conditioning? Which ones have ADUs? Which ones are already pending? That's our competition. The question is not, would new counters look nicer? Of course they would. The question is, do the new counters meaningfully improve our competitive position? That is the standard. Now we get to dangerous territory. Somebody suggests spending $100,000 or $150,000 or 250,000 before selling. At this point, we are not doing simple listing preparation. We are taking investment risk. We need to consider construction costs, architect and designer costs, if applicable, permits, potential delays, carrying costs, the seller's time, market movement while the project is underway, unknown conditions discovered during construction, and whether the finished design will actually appeal to the eventual buyer. Let's use a very simplified example. Suppose the house as is might sell around $2 million. Somebody says, spend $150,000 and you'll get 2.3 million. Sounds terrific. Except let's say the project becomes a $185,000. It takes 5 months. There are carrying costs. You move out, the market changes slightly. And after renovation, the house sells for $2.2 million. Was it worth doing? Maybe. Maybe not. Because we're not comparing $2 million to $2.2 million. We're comparing the net result of both strategies, including time, cost, risk, stress, and opportunity cost. That is the analysis I care about. And that's exactly why I don't think homeowners should make this decision from a generic list of 10 improvements that increase your home value. The answer is too property specific. If you're in Los Angeles and seriously considering selling in the next 6 to 12 months, I offer a complimentary seller positioning consultation. We can look at your home, your likely buyer, the current competition, and identify what I would consider doing, what I would consider skipping, and what information I'd want before spending money. There is a link in the description if you'd like to request one. No obligation, of course, to list. Sometimes my recommendation may be do less, and that can be just as valuable as knowing what to do. Now, let's get to something I think homeowners underestimate. There are things buyers dislike, and then there are things buyers fear. Those are not the same. A dated kitchen is usually something a buyer understands. They can see it, they know they'll probably change it eventually. What creates much more anxiety, however, is uncertainty around the foundation, roof, sewer, drainage, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, water intrusion, unpermitted work, retaining walls, slope, and increasingly in parts of California, insurance. A buyer may say, I can live with those cabinets, but they're much less comfortable saying, I'll figure out whether the foundation is moving after I buy it. That's why one of my favorite principles for sellers is this. Sometimes the best pre-sale investment isn't a renovation, it's information. That might mean obtaining a roof evaluation, a sewer inspection, looking into permits, getting an estimate for something you already know needs repair, having documentation for work you've completed, investigating insurability early if the property is in an area that could become an issue. Knowledge changes negotiation because uncertainty gives buyers room to imagine the worst case scenario. Insurance deserves particular attention in California. The state has been implementing reforms designed to stabilize the homeowners insurance market, and there are some encouraging signs. California's Department of Insurance reported that the FAIR Plan added approximately 16,000 residential policies in the first quarter of 2026. That's still growth, but significantly slower growth than during some prior quarters. So I wouldn't tell sellers nobody can get insurance. That's just not accurate, but I also wouldn't ignore the issue. If I'm selling a property in a location where insurance could concern buyers, I want to understand the situation before we have an offer. What are carriers saying? Does the roof create an issue? Is the electrical system likely to create an issue as well? Is it in a higher fire risk area? What documentation might an insurance broker need? The seller doesn't need to become an insurance expert, and neither do I. That's why we involve licensed insurance professionals. But waiting until day 8 of escrow to discover a potential insurance problem is not an ideal strategy. This brings us to pre listing inspections. Do I believe every seller needs to order every possible inspection before listing? No. But I do think there are properties where having more information before going to market can be strategically valuable, especially when there's something we already suspect buyers are going to investigate. Here's why. Let's imagine a buyer conducts an inspection after we're already in escrow and discovers a major issue. The buyer now controls the timing. We're under contract. They may request a credit, they may request a repair, they may threaten to cancel if they still have the applicable contingency. And suddenly, we're responding. Now, imagine we knew about the condition before listing. Maybe we repair it. Maybe we obtain multiple estimates. Maybe we don't repair it at all. Maybe we disclose it and price accordingly. But we get to make that decision deliberately. That is very different from discovering it under pressure. And in California, disclosure matters. For many residential sales, sellers have statutory disclosure obligations, including a transfer disclosure statement describing the property's condition. California's Department of Real Estate specifically emphasizes meaningful disclosure of known property conditions subject to the rules and exemptions applicable to the transaction. So here's an important distinction. Selling as is does not mean pretending you don't know what's wrong with the house. As is and don't disclose are not synonyms. Always follow the disclosure requirements applicable to your specific transaction and get legal advice where needed. Now, let me defend selling as is because sometimes agents speak about it as though it's automatically a failure of preparation. It isn't. There are absolutely situations where selling substantially in its existing condition makes sense. Maybe this is a trust or estate situation. Maybe you've lived in the property for 35 years and it needs comprehensive updating. Maybe you don't have the appetite for a 6 month construction project. Maybe you're relocating. Maybe the land or location is significantly more valuable to the likely buyer than your finishes. Maybe the next owner is probably going to remodel regardless. Or maybe the cost of bringing the house to today's design standard would be so large that you simply aren't likely to recover enough of it. In those situations, I may rather present the property honestly, clean it beautifully, remove clutter, address obvious distractions, perhaps stage selectively, provide useful information, and price it accordingly. That's still a strategy. Sell as is should not mean throw it on the MLS and hope. It means we're consciously choosing not to over improve an asset for someone else's taste. And this is where Los Angeles makes the whole conversation more complicated because Los Angeles buyer is almost a meaningless phrase. A buyer looking at a Mar Vista home, maybe prioritizing natural light, indoor outdoor flow, architectural character, a usable yard, an ADU or office, proximity to the beach or Culver City, and the emotional presentation of the house. A Sherman Oaks buyer may place relatively more importance on the lot, a pool, usable square footage, a functional family floor plan, HVAC, shade, parking, and how the property performs during hot valley summers. A South Bay buyer may weigh distance from the water, street location, parking lot utility, school district boundaries where relevant, commute patterns, and very specific micro neighborhood differences. I'm simplifying all three, obviously, but that's the point. There is no universal Los Angeles renovation formula. You need to understand what this buyer in this neighborhood at this price point expects. That's why a beautiful improvement in one neighborhood can be unnecessary in another. Another major mistake is renovating the house you're leaving as though you're the person staying. This happens all the time. A seller finally decides we're going to redo the kitchen, and then they choose every finish according to what they've always wanted. Very specific stone, specific cabinet color, specific hardware, very specific flooring. And suddenly we've spent a huge amount of money creating a brand new kitchen that half the buyer pool wants to change. If we're renovating for resale, I generally want broad appeal. That does not mean boring, it means intentional. The goal is not what would I personally love? The goal is what makes the greatest number of qualified buyers feel that they could live there. Before I authorize a major pre sale project, I want three numbers. Number one, estimated value as is. Number two, total realistic preparation cost, not the contractor's first estimate, the realistic all in number. And number three, estimated value after preparation. Then I want to consider time and risk. Because if we're spending $100,000 to create an estimated $120,000 increase in sale price, that may not be an attractive risk adjusted return. If we're spending $20,000 and significantly changing the emotional presentation and buyer pool, that may be completely different. This isn't an exact science. Real estate never is. But making the decision with numbers is much better than making it because somebody said updated homes sell for more. Of course, updated homes often sell for more. The question is whether your update creates more incremental value than it costs you. So here's a framework I would use. If you're considering selling, ask which of these four categories your house belongs in. One, repair. Repair when an obvious issue creates buyer fear or gives the buyer disproportionate negotiating leverage. Two, refresh. Refresh when the fundamentals are good, but the house feels tired, dark, cluttered, dated, or poorly presented. Three, renovate. Renovate when the improvement is relatively predictable, appeals broadly, can be completed in a reasonable time frame, and there is market evidence supporting the investment. And four, reposition. Sell substantially as is when the likely financial return does not justify the cost, risk, time, or disruption of renovation. If you take only one thing away from this entire video, make it this. Your job is not to make the house perfect. Your job is to position it properly for the market. That's different. So, should you renovate before selling your Los Angeles home? Maybe, but I would never start there. I would start by asking, what is the house worth today? Who is the likely buyer? What are they comparing it against? What is hurting the property's perceived value? What creates uncertainty? What can we improve economically? What should we leave alone? And what is the likely net result of each strategy? Because sometimes the smartest recommendation is a $75,000 improvement plan. Sometimes it's $15,000 worth of paint, landscaping, cleaning, and staging. And sometimes it's don't touch the kitchen. The next buyer is going to redo it anyway. That decision should be based on the house and the market, not a generic renovation list. I'm Caroline Cookie Park with Caroline Park Properties at Equity Union here in Los Angeles. I work with homeowners throughout the West Side, the Valley, and the South Bay, and one of my favorite parts of this job is helping sellers think through these decisions before they spend money they may not need to spend. If you're considering selling in the next year, you can use the link below to request a complimentary seller positioning consultation with me. We'll take an initial look at your likely market range, your current competition, what I think may be worth improving, what may not be worth touching, and what questions we should answer before putting the property on the market. No obligation to list. And if you're not ready to sell yet, subscribe. I'm building this channel specifically to help Los Angeles homeowners make smarter real estate decisions before those decisions become urgent. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What is the one renovation you're currently wondering whether you should do before selling? Kitchen, bathroom, floors, windows, landscaping, or something else? Leave it below. It may become the subject of a future video. Again, I'm Caroline Cookie Park with Caroline Park Properties at Equity Union. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.